and we specialize in superintendent search and placement. But the work that I've really come to enjoy maybe the most is this work, working with boards of education and superintendents on governance. And often, when I do the work, it's when a new superintendent has begun, and a major part of our focus in those meetings is really defining the roles and responsibilities of the board and the roles and responsibilities of the superintendent. That's not really going to be our focus today, because it's not the beginning of a brand new superintendent working together, but it is coming together with some relatively new board members. And I think it's a good timing to do this kind of work when you do have a couple of new board members joining a more experienced board. So the very first thing I want to talk about, and it's in the binder, is what I anticipate as our outcomes for today. And then I'm going to ask you to add what you anticipate and hope to be the outcomes for today. So you'll notice what it begins with, that you'll understand the possible dysfunctions of a team and the importance of overcoming the issues that can prevent a team from functioning at a high level. And I always like to bring that into workshops because teams of all sorts face the same potential issues, whether it's a board of education or a team working in the private sector, it doesn't matter. We will understand the elements of effective governance, and you have an outstanding board handbook, governance handbook, that addresses that, which has actually made it easy for me today because I often have to bring a lot of materials to share that I didn't have to bring today because the information's in your board handbook. So I appreciate that. We will review the adopted governance handbook and some other relevant bylaws, and those are in your binder. And we want to focus moving forward on the board's norms, expectations, and operational procedures as you work together. It's going to be a major focus. So there'll be some things in the handbook that maybe we don't have to spend as much time on, but really come back to that whole notion of what are your norms as you work together, your expectations of each other, and your operational procedures to make your work together effective. Go over to the next page, if you will. Whenever I facilitate a meeting, I like to begin with our norms at this meeting today. So I only have a few, and I'll ask you if you want to add any. Number one is to be fully present and engaged, to be a willing and active participant. I've sat in some meetings where, even though we encourage people to participate, not everybody does. And I think we lose something when that happens. So I really encourage you all to speak up during the meeting. At the same time, listen actively and carefully to others. Seek to understand others' point of view, ask to clarify, and practice inquiry. The understanding of others' point of view is critical. Not to assume that you know what somebody has in mind, but to really listen and to inquire. The next one, speak openly. Express your point of view without reservation. Don't hold ideas and opinions back. So this is an opportunity to speak openly and to not feel that you have to, quote unquote, walk on eggs. Next one, to treat each other with respect and consideration. Give everyone the opportunity to participate. So yes, we speak freely, we speak openly, but we treat everybody with respect and consideration. And I would assume that we all believe that. Are there any other norms for today's meeting that you'd like to add? Anything that we should add to this list? Okay, so we're good on that. Together with these norms, I bring certain assumptions that in my work, I think underlie the work of a board. And I want to bring these out. First one, the Board of Education and Superintendent are a team. The definition of a team is a group of individuals who come together with a common purpose and work together to achieve a common goal. That's what makes you a team. Although you are individuals, being a team requires that you put your common goals and interests above individual interests. Now that may sound easy, but it's not always easy in practice. When you come together as a board with the superintendent, you focus on those common goals of what's in the best interest of students and families in the district, and that means sometimes you have to step away from your own individual interests. Second assumption, The same factors that impact the success of any team also affect the success of this team. The same rules for effective team functioning apply. And the third assumption, which I think perhaps may be the most important, the success of the board and superintendent depends on earning and maintaining the trust of stakeholders, your district staff, parents, community members, and I think I'd like to add students, as certainly among your stakeholders. If you do not maintain the trust of stakeholders, if you are not perceived as working together for the benefit of all students, your positive influence on those stakeholders will be severely limited. And I'm going to share a little story that I think might illustrate this. This goes back a few years ago when I did a superintendent search in a district in the Antelope Valley. And when we first came in, one of the board members came to me and said, we are in trouble as a board. We're not getting along with each other. There are times at board meetings that we argue with each other. We really need to come together because we're not successful. So in the superintendent search, we met with a number of different groups, what we call focus groups, from staff to parents and community members, community groups, students, and we asked them what they thought the strengths of the district were and what they thought the biggest issues were. And we heard repeatedly what the biggest issue was. And what do you think it was? It was the board. Because people noted how the board did not function well together. They did not function as a team. So when I came back to meet with the board after all those interviews, I had to say to the board, well, we found there was a really common belief in what the biggest problem facing the district is. It's you. And they actually said, well, we knew that, but we didn't think the whole community knew that. Well, they watch your meetings. They pay attention. So what we agreed upon was this was the opportunity to do something about that. This was the opportunity to regain community trust because they understood they had lost a great deal of trust because they were not working together effectively. And I want to give them credit. They did an excellent job, and working with the new superintendent as well. But it was really eye-opening for them to realize how obvious it was to the community that they were the problem that people had identified. Okay, I want to ask you a question before we go on to the next part of the handbook, and I'm going to ask everybody to just give me your answer kind of briefly. What do you hope that we can accomplish today, meeting together? What is your goal for our time together today? And I don't stand on ceremony. I just kind of go around and maybe start with different people at each time, but I see, Emil, you have your hand up.
So in looking through the governance handbook, I'm hoping that we can establish, and these words are really important to me, unity and purpose, because I think that that is what has been holding not only this board, but the previous board, the struggles that have taken place on these boards, this one and the previous one, is that we have not established our unified purpose. And that's something that I would like to talk about today.
Very good. I would add that that doesn't happen just in one meeting. You can come to understandings about what that looks like, and hopefully you will, but it has to be something you approach in an ongoing manner to maintain that. Who else? What would you like to accomplish today? Joseph?
I'd like to have the question answered. One community member said, is this board salvageable after the last board meeting? And I don't know, but I hope I can find out today. And one of the things I'm looking for is, can we work as teams? Currently, I'm working with Mr. Barham in subcommittee, Mrs. Wursman in subcommittee, Mr. Schwartz in subcommittee. I'm looking forward to working with Dr. Anderson. So I don't want us to be siloed. And going back to what Emil just said, unity or purpose, part of that grounds on the mission, vision, values that our divided board all voted in. Mr. Schwartz was here, Mrs. Wursma. That's a common starting point. So for me, can we work as a team and not be siloed? I'm hoping that can be answered today.
Good, good, thank you. How about Melinda? By the way, I hope you don't mind that I'm informal and I'm addressing you by first name.
Yeah, please
It's an informal
first
group.
name. I want to see less division. I know that I had a someone called me from another board and just said, I mean, it was rough, but they said, like, we're disgraced right now. Like, we need, I'm hoping that we can be less divided, find more common ground. I think we do have more in common than differences, so I'm hoping that we can focus on that, and I want to see less division, because I think that we do all have a lot of common values and goals, so.
Well, we'll find that your handbook addresses that, what
Yeah.
the common ground should be, and hopefully we'll have widespread agreement on that. Jennifer, what would you like to accomplish today?
So I have a 1-minute synopsis, and I think why I'm here today is to really figure out who I'm working with. Just to let you know, Dr. Alexander and Mr. Barham campaigned as candidates aligned with the values of Dr. Kay and I, our policies, and after they were elected, they formed an alliance, as they have a right to do, with Mr. Schwartz, who has opposed a lot of those policies and values. Together, the three chose Melinda as president with no experience and then pushed through really significant bylaws, restricting speech, public comment, access to legal counsel. They even stripped me from working on important policy that I've dedicated 15 months to for parents. I feel like on top of it, new trustees are meeting with people in the community to drive doubt in their minds about who we are, and it feels really disrespectful and disparaging. And so because things are divisive and they've each accurately spoken to it, my hope today is that we can have hard conversations, not platitudes. We need to talk about things and move forward with truth and transparency, understanding where we're really at. And I hope for a positive outcome with that.
Thank you. And that does fit with my hope that you will all speak frankly about what's on your mind. And there may be some topics on your mind that are not addressed in the agenda and may not be directly addressed in the board handbook. So one of the things I'm going to ask in a moment is there anything, any specific topic you also want to address that would not be included here? But as we have discussions, please speak openly. Yes, Stephen.
I guess it's fitting as a senior member of the board that I speak last.
There you are.
So I was elected in 20, and I was reelected in this past election. And for the first 2 years, we had a board that probably our board meetings were maybe an hour and 15 minutes. We had 3 new board members elected in 22, and I became part of the minority with another board member. And then one of our board members resigned, and we added a board member. That was before the election. And for 2 years, this other board member and I sat here and were bullied and made fun of, and our ideas were put to the side while the board majority pushed through their ideas. And it was a very stressful time for me and Allison Barclay, who was the other board member. There was lots of unrest in the community. COVID was a big part of it, but most of my constituents and most of my email that I got, they supported me and Allison in what we were doing, and we just kind of had to sit back and take it because that's how it was. We were the minority. Now we have two new board members and 1 board member who was reelected, and people who were on the other side are now complaining that they're in the minority. Well, you know, sometimes that's how it goes. I have 3 issues that I'm on the board for, and I've spoken to my constituents about it, and they know what they are. I'm here for students, I'm here for schools, and I'm here for fiscal integrity. Everything else is irrelevant. If our policies don't work for kids and schools and saving money and saving the taxpayers of our district money, then I'm against it. Those are my 3 priorities. I'm not interested in politics. I'm not interested in a political agenda. I don't talk about politics. Those are the things I want to do. And I'm very happy that I have 2 new board members who have so far agreed with me on those policies and moving the district forward along with Dr. Woods and our cabinet, in keeping those things in mind. Thank you.
Well, you mentioned a couple of words that struck me that I think we need to be open about not occurring. And that is, you mentioned the word bullying, and you mentioned being made fun of. And regardless of whose position it is, politically or otherwise, I hope that one of the things that the board will agree to is that that's not acceptable. That board members will work together without getting into personalities, without bullying each other, no matter which side you're on, and just talking about which side you're on. Ultimately, you're all on the same side, which is the student side. You may disagree in some other issues, and that's normal, but ultimately, what brings you together, in my opinion, is more critical than any division. But not bullying, not being made fun of, those are things that I hope we'll have no problem agreeing to among board members. So, I appreciate and thank you for giving me your input. As we go along, there may be a few other things that come to mind that you want to get out of today's meeting. I want you to turn to the next page, which has the graphic of the pyramid, and tell you where this comes from. Patrick Lencioni has done a great deal of work, and I've been an avid reader of some of his books, and he focuses on what effective teams do and what ineffective teams are like. And he's actually entitled this particular book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is interesting because we want to turn it around, obviously, and talk about what makes teams function well. And he's put it in the form of a pyramid, meaning that if you can't achieve, or talking about a dysfunction, if you can't eliminate the dysfunction at the base, it's unlikely that you'll be able to accomplish the other things. And so the very first dysfunction he mentions is the absence of trust. And I will tell you from my experience, and Gary as a superintendent, my guess is that you would agree that if you can't have trust among the members of a team, if you can't build it and occasionally have to rebuild it when it falters, the team is not likely to be able to achieve your goals. Because that lack of trust, the suspicion that people don't have goodwill, the feeling that I, as a team member, can't necessarily trust you to not do something harmful to me, those kinds of issues, they interfere with all the work that you need to do together. So the most critical piece is building trust. And from what I've heard a little bit today, that's got to be critical for this group, to be able to rebuild trust where maybe it hasn't existed, and start from that perspective. Because if you can't trust each other to be of goodwill and not mean harm to each other, it's unlikely you'll be able to work together to accomplish what you want to. Moving up the pyramid, and this is an interesting one, he says another dysfunction is a fear of conflict, meaning that people choose to ignore differences or ignore conflict because they're worried about not being able to handle it. I don't think fear of conflict has been the issue here, from what I'm hearing, but it's how to handle conflict in a way that's respectful and productive. I was working with the board a couple of weeks ago where the board president said one of his goals, and I thought it was well stated, is that we can, as a board, we can disagree without being disagreeable. And I like that. I hadn't heard that one before. But I thought, well, that's really a goal. You're not always going to agree. And sometimes you may be one person who disagrees with 4, or you may be 2 people that disagree with 3, and it can go back and forth. But the notion is to do that and to be able to deal with that kind of conflict of ideas without making it personal conflict. The next dysfunction is a lack of commitment, where people don't necessarily buy into the goals that everybody has agreed to. And one of the things we're going to be working on today from your handbook are those goals. The avoidance of accountability is next, and that becomes interesting because what he's saying is it's the responsibility of members of a team to hold each other accountable. That when people don't live up to the agreements that you've made as a part of a team, you as a member have a responsibility to hold the others accountable. And when people don't do that, teams don't function well. Now again, you do it with respect, you do it with consideration, but that lack of accountability can become a really high-level dysfunction. And then the last one that he mentions is inattention to results. Sometimes losing track of what your results are supposed to be, what's most important, and sometimes focusing on things that are less important. But first of all, understanding what your results are, what you're here for, what you hope to accomplish, and paying attention to those results, critical. Inattention to the results will be a high-level dysfunction. So it's kind of interesting to see that from the negative perspective. Obviously, any team wants to turn that around and say, we have trust. We're able to deal with conflict in a productive way. There's commitment, we hold each other accountable, and we pay attention to results. Those would be factors that I hope you would all bear in mind. Questions or comments so far? I know I'm rushing through this and I don't want to do that, but anytime you have a comment or a question as we're going forward, please interrupt me. I don't mind.
I would love to make a brief comment here. I think that trust is of the highest priority. And what we do need to talk about today is when people are creating division in the community and giving misinformation, it's a huge, huge problem. And I really feel like the true leadership is helping people become bigger, bolder, and braver versions of themselves, not to kind of squelch someone, to elevate yourself. And I feel like that's what's gone on, and it's that struggle between the new guard coming on and the people that have been here for a while. And I'm so happy we're doing this, and I wish it had been done sooner, because in going to the first couple of meetings and seeing things pushed through with major bylaws without collaboration was a total bullet in the thought of trust and looking to the new people to understand we're here with you, but we didn't have really important discussions first. And then social media, as you know what people are saying and where the messages are. So I think we all have to remember that if we're putting something out, it better be truthful. And that the onus is on all of us to do that. I think it's really important. That right there is going to establish trust again if we're actually lifting each other up and not defending ourselves by pulling the other person down. So I think that's really important.
Something that I heard you say that I think it's important to bear in mind as the board takes action, and you mentioned some bylaws, but when you take action on any issue that comes up is, and tell me if I'm quoting you correctly, that you feel there needs to be adequate time for collaboration and discussion, that you don't like the notion of something being pushed through. And I would agree that that is important. Boards function well when everybody feels they've had an opportunity to be heard. Now, collaboration doesn't mean you'll always have everybody agree. But the collaboration also means we've all been heard, and now we're going to make a decision, and we're going to vote, and sometimes it's a narrow majority, sometimes it's a greater majority. But the collaboration involves, I think, being heard. So I think that's something moving forward as an expectation that the board would have, that nobody feels I haven't had a chance to be heard. The other thing you mentioned is that nobody on the board should be building yourself up by putting other people down. And again, that's an important part of trust, that you can't really have trust if people feel that you're doing something that's harmful to them. So I again, think that that's an assumption we could make, that that's an expectation that we would have for everybody. Any other comments on that topic?
Yeah. When this goes south, this pyramid, the concept of justice comes in, and that's probably what all 5 board members want without even saying it. There has been a rift between rights and wrongs, goods and bads, and especially senior board members, there might have been more injustice. The longer time you're on a board, you might have been rubbed the wrong way. So that's going to come out here, and it might come out sideways, but I think that needs to be talked about, and that's the ugly part of this meeting, is there have been injustices. But in the other sense, our community outside of this, there's a lot of fighting going on. But what I'm going to do is hold the accountability and blame on this board right now. And here's the analogy I'll use. Imagine we're in a boat in the middle of a pond and a rock gets dropped. It causes ripples to go outwards. Those rocks being dropped are from us. We can set the the tone on leadership by example, all 5 of us right now, and say, look, I don't think I want to drop the rock anymore, create the ripples, because it really harms the community. I agree with you. We lose stakeholder interest when they're like, you guys look like jackasses. Fix it, man. Fix it, bro. That's why we elected you. I hear this all day long. And so one thing that I value is trustworthiness and honesty. I'll work with any board member. You start lying to me and manipulating the truth, I might still work with you, but it's going to diminish our results. One thing I refuse to value is bitterness. I don't want to be bitter anymore. I don't want any other board to be bitter anymore. And when I say that, I'm willing to talk to any member of the community right now, sitting in here, possibly even laughing at me or not laughing at me. That's what I mean. I don't want to be bitter. You want to talk? I'll talk. So I think the leadership starts with us.
I really appreciate what you said in that the responsibility, when there are rifts, lies with the board to fix it. Yes, often when there's division among a board, it reflects division within the community. We know that. People are elected by different attendance areas, and you have constituents that may give you their input, and so you're aware of the division in the community. And if you're at a board meeting and people come up to make public comment, the division becomes obvious. But you can't fix division within a community. You have to start with yourself. You have to figure out, although we'll disagree on certain issues, as you just said, we can fix it. We can see that we're honest with each other, we don't lie, that we don't operate out of bitterness, we don't operate out of one person elevating themselves at the expense of somebody else. If those things are agreed upon, the bitterness in the community tends to go down a bit too, because they see the board has made an effort to fix it. So I think that's well stated. Now, as we're talking today, if something comes to mind, again, please speak up. I don't want anybody to leave here today to say, I had something on my mind and I didn't get a chance to say it. So please remember that you have that opportunity. Yep, Stephen.
I wasn't going to speak again because I thought I said everything I wanted to say, and I agree with Joseph that there is a lot of bitterness in our community. There's a lot of different points of view. But I think if we can agree to focus, and I'm going to say it again because those are the 3 things I want to focus on. I want to focus on our students, on our schools, and making sure that we are fiscally sound and don't waste money. And if we can keep those 3 things in our vision and put aside all the other political or other agendas that are irrelevant to what we're supposed to be doing as board members, I think that maybe we can make a new start. But if we can't agree on doing that, then I think what's happened in the past is going to recur. And I'm willing to people know I took a lot of guff for 2 years. I'm willing to forego that and move ahead, only if we can agree that we're going to move forward with those kind of priorities and focusing on what's important for our district.
Melinda?
I, too, am going to agree with Joseph. I liked your analogy of dropping stones, and I feel like I know that I think it's been out of frustration that I'll express my frustrations to people that I feel like are my friends in the community. And by doing that, I am undermining the board. One of my concerns is I think that we all know that every single one of us has created ripples. And I truly believe that we should all, I'm glad you brought it up, because I think my first thing is I want to call my friend and tell my friend, or I want to have coffee with my friend and tell them all of my frustrations, and then I throw everybody else under the bus. And my intention isn't to tear people down. I'm actually trying to lift myself up and feel better, but then I do think I'm undermining the board, because the people I'm affiliated with are affiliated with Joseph and Jen and Emil. And so then I think that's part of the problem. Is I'm hoping that we can all take accountability and say, this isn't a one-person problem. As a board, I think we've all contributed to this. I do agree with Steve on the important thing is the students' fiscal responsibility. And that being said, I think that sometimes there are some issues that we want to look at that don't have to be as political as they are. But I agree with Jen and Joseph and Emil that there are some things that we want to look at and say, is it better for the students if we look at some of these policies that we want to put in place? And I think that we can, and back to what Jen said, like, if we slow step them and make sure that we get a lot of feedback and involve the community, that we could actually maybe get a greater consensus. Not everyone's going to agree with us on these policies, but I think if we brought the community in and worked more as a board, we would have a better success as we get to like do this again. So I agree with you, but I also agree with Joseph. I think we're kind of all on the same page.
Well, I also want to point out that something you mentioned that I think everybody should pay attention to, and that is the danger you run into sometimes as a board member when you get together with friends or other constituents and talk about your frustrations. Because you may not mean for this to be the case, but that's often interpreted as being negative toward other people. And it creates more sense of division, and you're perhaps just trying to get your frustrations out, but really what the message it gives is something negative about other people. So I would say when you do that, you have to understand what the consequences could be. So when you talk to the community, I think you have to be very careful. It's one thing to express your opinion, that's your personal opinion, but it's another thing to express it in a way that might make the entire board or other board members look bad. And I think that destroys trust right there. So I think you want to be
Melinda, I
careful.
just want to thank you for hearing me and acknowledging that, because I know you and I met this weekend, and I totally appreciate your words in saying that, because we have all had deficiencies, and I am hoping for a breakthrough. Mr. Schwartz, I hear you too, and we're going to talk through some more things today. I think it's recognizing we are here for the students. Our worldviews are going to be a little bit different, so we're never going to completely align. But I want you to know as we work through this, I do want to apologize for hurt that you've been through. And I've got some that I'll talk about later. But that's where it starts, is listening and going, I acknowledge that, and then moving on. So
Thank you.
this is good.
I'd
Thank
like
you.
to say something.
Emil?
Okay, so I would like to address the alliance, or the perceived alliance. And I would like to ask you, and you, Joseph, why is the approval rating of Congress as low as it is, before I start? Why is the approval rating of Congress for years and years and years so low amongst the American public? I want an answer from them.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Why do you think, and if you don't have a response, that's okay, and then I will go into what I want to go into in terms of the alliance. But why do you think the approval rating, when the American public is asked why, the approval rating of Congress is so low amongst the American people, why do you think that is?
People have a high level of cynicism for a variety of reasons. They see the waste, they see the division, they see people running on a platform and then getting to Washington, D.C. and flipping or changing their mind or going with what's convenient in the moment. And I think we've entered a great era in this country where a lot of things are going to change, and I'm hopeful for that. I think this board has that capacity as well, but there's been a lot of dishonesty along the way, and you and I need to talk about this later in the meeting, but you're
Okay,
right. People
okay.
get cynical, and they want to see collaboration.
So let me say, that's exactly where I was at. That's exactly where I was going. People have a low approval rating of Congress because people across both sides of the aisle, the American people expect them to reach across the aisle and to work together. And that is what I have done, okay, with Mr. Schwartz, because he and we have talked this through. Politically, our ideologies, we're really not on the same page. He said, in conversation, he may say something and I may say, stop. Okay, or he may bring up something about what's going on with our current president. I may say stop. We go back and forth, okay? But he and I, we love kids. Our priorities are education. Our priorities are safe schools. Our priorities are fiscal responsibility. And we have been able to find common ground in that. And I think that that is what this community expects, this board to be functional. And part of that is reaching across the aisle, which we have done together. He's the only one here who's been elected twice to a 4-year term. He represents a fifth of the community, okay? And I think that that means something. I think that that's what the community expects overall. I know that there are certain people in the community who do not expect that have expected that since it's, you know, the assumption has been that we're for conservatives and he's on the other side, that I would come in and just crap on Schwartz, okay? Well, that's not how I have rolled in my life, okay? That is not how I have been successful in my life in terms of business and in my career in education. We work across the aisle, okay? We put our political differences aside and we find common ground. And this guy, I mean, when I have seen him at schools, he is great with the kids. He loves the teachers. He wants the best for the schools, and so do I. And that's why I can work with this man on policies. But I think that the expectation has been something different, even from the both of you, okay? And that's not how I want to operate here. So
I have to answer you right here because it's the appropriate place to do it, okay? So let's just do this because it's really important. In the December 17th meeting, you specifically went after my prayer life on the dais in a very personal way. It was extremely unprofessional. And here's the thing. You and I did life for 6 months. My time, my resources, my family, my husband walking in 110-degree heat, me working, clerking, presiding, full-time, trying to parent my adult children, talking with you for an hour on the phone, giving you every network, consultant, thought, tip, anything that I could give to you. I don't blame you for meeting and establishing a relationship with Mr. Schwartz. But what you did that night in throwing me and Dr. K under the bus was saying, you two have accomplished nothing in 2 years. You need to understand that was the deepest form of betrayal for me because I went out of my way, seeing exactly what you can offer as a trustee and will. That is a problem.
Okay.
Not that you have decided Mr. Schwartz is
Well,
someone to work
brought
with.
Up the
He
alliance.
is.
You brought up the alliance. You brought up the alliance, so I wanted to address the alliance. There's no formed deliberate alliance here. It's this is how I operate, and I want to address your thoughts, okay? I don't want to dismiss them because I think you're right. It's important that I address those things with you. But you brought up the alliance originally, that you're making it sound like it's some sort of a conspiracy, okay? And it's not, okay? I genuinely feel like we are on the same page, and we should be on the same page because that's what it goes back to. It goes back to unity and purpose. Now, so I want to address you, okay? I was fully behind you, okay, all the way until these PERB decisions, okay, came into the forefront here, and they really disturbed me because as I began to investigate what took place with these PERB decisions that came down that cost the district roughly $100,000, and it's not just parental notification, and it's not just the flag policy, but it's also about the release time with Mr. Diaz, which we never even talked about. We never even got to that one, that the way that you and Dr. Komrosky operated, okay, was not at the advice of your attorneys who, in my discussions with them and with the executive staff, said, don't do these things, that you ignored cease and desist, okay, from the teachers union, and that really bothered me, okay? And the fact that we talked about this at your house 2 nights before the board meeting, and I gave you an opportunity, okay, to take some accountability, which you did not do, okay? And that was my issue with you. And I want you to know up until the very end, okay, and you can ask, and I didn't discuss these issues with these people here out of a concern of a Brown Act violation, but Cole Mann, Suzanne, all knew that I was struggling because you helped me, and I want to acknowledge that. you helped me in my campaign, but at the end of the day, I could not reconcile you not taking any accountability for what you did, okay, in terms of ignoring the advice of the attorneys in terms of parental notification and that flag policy, and with the president of the union and costing the taxpayer money that you cost, both of you, okay? That was my issue with you to the very end. And I struggled to the very end. Now I want to talk about the prayer life. Okay, let me address that. As a Christian, how does God command us to pray? He commands us to wait, okay, and to be patient, to wait on him, okay? And I apologize for bringing that out into the open, but I was so frustrated, okay, by the fact that you were not waiting, okay? And that was the basis of my comment, that you were not waiting, okay? That you were calling people, and I know that for fact, okay? You were calling people to try to get them to influence my vote, to vote for you, okay? And it got to me, okay? I'm just going to come straight out with you. I mean, I was with you, okay, up until the fact that you would not take accountability. And
That is not true, and I'm going to address that.
Okay, you know what? I mean, I'm telling you like it is. Okay?
You're telling
I'm
it
telling
as your
you from
perspective. That's right.
That is from my perspective, and like I said, I struggled to the very end, but at the end of the day, and it's just like what you said, when you're out campaigning, it's one thing. When you're going to be a trustee, it's another. This is about making decisions which impact the taxpayer money. And
What about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that were wasted as the union sued us and tried to recall Dr. Komrosky?
You know what?
There is an
I
entirety
agree
of
with you.
context
I agree
here.
with you. I agree with
And
you.
while you were in the district office,
I
you weren't
agree.
getting our perspective or the additional legal
You know
advice
what,
that we
Jen?
had in closed.
Jen, I agree with you on May M versus Komrosky. I'm not talking about those legal fees. I am not talking about those. I am talking about the decisions that you made, okay, in terms of parental notification and that flag policy, when the union said cease and desist, and when the attorney said to you, don't go forward with this, okay, you did it anyway, you made a decision, and you cost the taxpayers $113,000 as a result of those, in my opinion, very poor decisions.
We
okay?
had alternative legal advice. We were told we could appeal it. We did not know that Mr. Gonzalez was going to leave the state, that we would be hamstrung, and that they'd send that back to us without having any way to further address it and rectify it. The union made their decision that it was decisional bargaining and not effects bargaining. They were given multiple opportunities. And here's something I think we need to address with the district office. When onboarding happens, there's an issue, because I know you mentioned you spent 3 hours with Dr. Woods and going to coffee and hearing from the cabinet. When I fully believe if Dr. Komrosky and I had been in that office to talk to you about additional information that wasn't being included, you would have thought through that information differently. We've lived it for 2 years. There has been funds spent. For me, fighting for our kids, it's been worth it, because at the end of the day, I feel like the representation we had fighting PERB was somewhat anemic. It is what it is at this point, but we have always done day by day what we feel is best to protect kids. And there has been hundreds of thousands of dollars in waste to try to recall him when he's back, with the way the unions decided to spend taxpayer dollars. You mentioned it was a lawyer who gave you numbers. When Dr. Woods asked who that was, you didn't give it to him. You then were told to talk to me. You refused to give it to me. Now in an email from the public, I hear that you got that from assistant superintendents.
It was both lawyer and superintendent.
So here's my problem.
Jen?
Wait,
Who
it does
cares?
matter, Dr.
No, it
Woods. Here's
doesn't.
what
Who
I'd like to
cares?
request. When trustees are onboarded, I think there should be more transparency. It should be, it's nice to meet you. Let us talk to you about the process. Here's your computer. It shouldn't be 3 hours
Jen,
of
if it was-
discussions
if it
where
was
we don't have the ability to
$1
know
or
what the information is and
$100,000,
process
it should
it.
not have been. It should not have been even. As far as I'm concerned, you've hired and fired so many attorneys. Okay, it's like, which one are you going to trust? When attorneys tell you, don't do these things, okay, you need to take their advice.
There
You
is
hired
one
them.
that we had for that,
Okay.
that I did not trust because there wasn't information given that I needed. The point is, here we're at a place where we do need to get through this.
Okay.
And I'm hoping you can give me a public apology for, on the dais, addressing my religious life and prayer life. I think Melinda mentioned, you know what, that's unprofessional, and it is. So here's the thing, on the dais, let's avoid that.
Okay,
I think it's really
I
important.
apologize.
I accept it.
I apologize.
I think this is a time I'm going to jump in, because I think,
But I do want to say something else, too.
okay,
I do want to say something else.
Okay, we're gonna try to keep it
I
brief,
want to, I
gentlemen.
want to say something else in terms of accountability, okay? This is for you and Joseph, because I had a very hard time with both of you in closed session, okay, that day. And the fact that I had to fight my way, okay, not just by myself, but we had to fight our way out of bringing parental notification and the flag policy out in the forefront, okay, to the public. You two wanted to keep that in closed session.
No, Dr. Woods specifically talked with me about that and chose
You
to
know,
keep it in closed.
I understand.
That is not something that Joseph and I
Excuse me,
conspired to do,
excuse me,
ever.
Excuse me. I understand that Dr. Woods recommended that, but you were the presiding officer, and you could have overruled him, okay? So if that was the case, where you did not want to keep it in closed session, then why did you vote against, okay, bringing it out into the open, okay, when the motion was made that we bring it out into open session? Both you and Dr. Komrosky voted against that.
I would like to talk. You made a lot of assertions, and let me just tell you right now, you're violating the Brown Act by talking about what happens in confidentiality in closed session. Please stop.
You know what?
That's number one. Number
It was
two,
read out in open session, Joe.
I've heard
the
you for
vote.
about 10 minutes,
Okay,
Emil.
okay.
Number two, you make a lot of assertions, and there's half-truths involved, and there's lack of context, and I want trustworthiness from you. I'm in subcommittee with you. Me and you have had this conversation. I'm willing to move past all that. You make a lot of assertions, throwing us under the bus, your first meeting. Number three, you talk about reaching out to Mr. Schwartz. No problem, you're a new board member. Great, right? Reach out to all the board members. But to insinuate that I'm not doing it or somebody else isn't doing it, you're completely missing the context. And I'll talk with Mr. Schwartz later, and we'll move past this. But I have an injustice that was committed against me by him gathering signatures for my recall. So pardon me, Emil, if I'm not reaching out to Mr. Schwartz to mend that bridge where there's an injustice from him against me on the recall. Me and him can air this out later, and I promise you, Mr. Schwartz, I will not bring it up again after this meeting. It will be water under the bridge. But don't think you can come in here and make all these assertions without pushback, because some of them are outright false, Emil. And I don't want to spend all more board meeting pin-picking them. Number one, you lied. There is no truth when you say you talk to an attorney, but then you don't give it to Dr. Woods, you don't give it to Mrs. Wiersma. Then you shift gears and said, well, it wasn't a lawsuit, it was attorney's fees. Well, then you shift another gear, and then you say, well, it wasn't an attorney, it was assistant superintendents, two of them you talked to. These are what I call lies. I'm going to call them like they are.
I don't think so, but let's move
Okay.
on. Let's move on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be careful with your
move on.
assertions.
You know what? I'm not making any false assertions.
You just made some.
Everything that I've said is true.
Oh, there you go.
Bottom line.
so I would like to move us along. Melinda?
Well, I think right now what we have is everybody wants to take names, and then we exasperate our problems. Who said that? And then we say, who said it? And then that person is now brought in to our dysfunction. So I've been encouraging to stop. One, I think we need to stop saying, who said that? Because I don't think I made the point, like, someone said something to me. They didn't, what was their motive of making this story up out of the blue for me? So people have said things, but I have encouraged Emil and Mr. Schwartz, and I've encouraged, we need to stop saying, like, let's take names, because what we're doing is we're pulling the public into our dysfunction. And whether it's an attorney or whether it's Dr. Woods, I really want to discourage the rest of the board of saying, I want names, because all we're doing is causing more dysfunction, because the second someone takes a name, now that person's been dragged in, and they're getting called out, and they're getting phone calls or whatever. So I really think, like, I don't think there's any incentive for Emil to have made up the fact, I was there was an attorney present, but I'm kind of like, let's not take names anymore because it's not helping, it's exasperating the problem. So that's my point with.
Thanks. I am going to move us along, and I think there's a balance in today's meeting between speaking openly about things that are still disturbing you that may have happened in the past and totally dwelling on the past. So I want to maintain the balance in the sense that everybody has an opportunity to speak about what's on your mind, but we do have a focus, and I'd like to move us ahead, if that's okay. Well, the next few tabs are on specific board policies or board bylaws, but I want to jump ahead and come back to those later and look at the governance manual itself, because there are parts of the governance manual that we definitely want to make sure we address. It's lengthy, and I will tell you we're not going to go through it word by word because we don't have the time today, but I do want to focus on some areas that I consider important, and I did speak with Gary prior to today to agree on some areas that we want to make sure we address. But if I leave a section out that you think is important, please get us back to it, because I may decide that something isn't as critical and you may want to talk about it. But as we look at the governance handbook, I want to move a little bit forward and go to page 4. I've heard discussion about unity of purpose, and that is the most critical piece here in terms of what a board needs to do. And you'll see that on page 4, when it talks about for a governance team to work together effectively, members need to maintain a unity of purpose. And Stephen, you mentioned the things that are most important to you to accomplish, and we're going to address those, and plus a couple of others that are mentioned in the handbook. Then, of course, agree and govern within the appropriate rules, and you do have bylaws that address the rules of governance. And if there's any question on those that you might want to take a look at making any revisions, we will do that today. You want, and this one, of course, is critical, create and sustain a positive governance culture. And sometimes to do that, you have to be willing to let the past be the past and say, how do we create that positive governance culture moving forward? That's really what we're here for today. And then create a supportive structure for effective governance. So that's what I want to talk about on page 4. Let's jump a little bit ahead to page 6, which talks about the board values. I'm not going to read those aloud, but please take a moment to look at the 4 areas of board values listed on page 6. And the one that I just briefly want to address is under leadership, because that's the main focus of why we're here today. Prioritize parent and community engagement. Now, that's an interesting one, because one might say, well, I want to prioritize engagement by just bringing certain people forward who happen to believe the way I believe. That could be a type of engagement that may ultimately provide more division. If every board member just says, I'm going to encourage people who agree with me on this area to come forward, and we basically, it becomes like an echo chamber where you hear the same points of view over and over again, and it doesn't necessarily move the board along. So parent and community engagement needs to go beyond just getting people to speak their mind on issues at board meetings. It means really to be actively engaged in the ways they can. For example, you have committees that include parents for LCAP and other opportunities for real participation. So I urge you to think of engagement as beyond just coming to board meetings and speaking. The one I want to really talk about is to set clear standards for respectful professional conduct. I think we agree that that may have been lacking, and that's one of the things we want to agree on today. Now, demonstrating fiscal responsibility, you mentioned that, Stephen. I think that's one of the obvious purposes of a board. If you can't keep the district physically healthy, nothing else you try to do is going to work. Okay, I want to turn to page 7, and I'm not going to read through all of these, but do take a look in the middle of the page where it talks about the board carries out responsibilities in each of the following job areas. Are those areas pretty clear to everybody? What your role and responsibility is in those areas? Because if not, this is a good opportunity to bring it up.
Yeah, I just want to encourage the board. As far as I know, a lot of those are lumped up. And I brought my master's in governance handbooks.
Oh, good.
It's like a 5-week course.
Good.
This is not even the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of complexity involved in all of this.
Yep.
My desire is to have the whole board go to the Masters in Governance together. When I was there in San Marcos last year, in person, I actually sat with another board. They weren't all on the same page. They were mostly conservative. There was one liberal, one moderate, but it was actually, they had a unity of purpose. They actually respected each other at the table, and I never forgot that. There's people of all stripes that come to these meetings. And I learned so much in this, so this is just the very tip of the iceberg. I know, Jen, you did some online. I don't know if you completed it. I completed it. I don't know if Steve did, but that's my recommendation for us. And it goes back to the value on the next, or the previous page, emphasizing professional development.
Well, I'm doing the boot camp now on, we did, the first one was on Brown Act. The second one was on ethics training, which all of us have to take. If you haven't taken it, you have to take it if you're going to be on the board in 26. And then we have another one in March. So I have been doing a lot of that professional development through CSBA. And I don't know about the Masters in Governance, haven't had time. I've been busy with other stuff, but I will look into doing it also.
Well, I concur with what you said, Joseph. I think it's very valuable. I remember as a new superintendent going through it and encouraging my board members to go through it. I was fortunate that at the time, most of my board members had gone through it. But when new board members came on, I encouraged them to do it. I think it's such a solid foundation in effective governance that you learn there. And you're absolutely right that what's in your handbook is just the tip of the iceberg. That really is effective, very effective professional development. Now, whether a board decides to do it all together or individuals do it, because I know everybody has things in their schedule they have to consider, but I think it's really a very positive way to be on the same page about governance. So I agree with you.
The one thing I want to say about Mr. Barham is that you had a great suggestion as we worked together for months on looking at our niche and where we have interest, where we have experience and knowledge, because I totally understood his expertise in math and accounting and business. And so I think if as we learn in these different areas, we can also develop that. We can't all do everything, and then we can't usurp one another trying to do what everybody else is doing. If we can figure out where that focus is, then I think we get stronger as we understand all of these tenets. So I just wanted to compliment you on that because I felt like that was wise.
Well, you do bring different strengths and different areas of expertise, and it's really helpful if you respect that in each other and take advantage of it. I agree.
And I think, Dr. Woods, we talked about that, like with the WASC process, that when you go through WASC, you have this, a school has different focus groups, organization and culture, assessment and accountability. So there's different focuses here, or foci, and I think it would help the board that if we could find a focus, because I think what has happened in the past, and I think how most boards function, is everybody's kind of into everything, okay? And I think that if we can become experts in areas that we already might have expertise in, or things that interest us, I think it's going to help us become a more effective board.
Well, you want to take advantage of people's knowledge, and not everybody has that same level of knowledge on other issues. It doesn't mean that you're not going to inquire further and go out and learn some things on your own. Obviously you are. But it's a good opportunity to really rely on the capital that you have, that people have experience and knowledge in different areas. So I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to do that. On the bottom of page 7, going into page 8, it talks about the basic responsibilities, and I'm not going to read through every bullet, but I am going to point out a couple of areas that I think are interesting. First one says set direction for community schools, and the very first thing that's the most critical focus of a board, and should always be, is the focus on student learning. focus on students. And when we say learning, we obviously know in this day and age, academic learning is just a piece of it. There's academic learning, there's social emotional learning, there's ability to participate in athletics and other areas, but overall student learning and student well-being, I'm glad that's the very first one here. Because anything that you do that is not aligned to benefit students, you have to ask yourself, is this a good thing? The other thing I want to point out here that wasn't always included, but has been for about the last 10 years, is the fourth bullet. Ensure an appropriate inclusive process to establish district priorities that involve all stakeholders through the LCAP process. LCAP is about 10 years old or 11 years old now, and that's something that the board has a responsibility to monitor, that it's being done properly, there's enough opportunity for both staff and parental community input, but as important as anything is that you're monitoring progress toward your goals of the LCAP. And I've seen some boards that say, oh, great, we have an LCAP, but they don't really take the time to monitor the progress toward those goals. And that becomes a critical responsibility of yours. Okay, I want to turn to page 8. Establish an effective and efficient structure for the school district. I think most of these are obvious.
I have a question.
Yes?
So as you go through these things, are you going to give us a chance to talk about these things?
Yes, and at any point when I stop, that means you have an opportunity to talk.
Yeah, I mean, I would like, and it goes back to unity in purpose.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it's what is our unified purpose here?
Well,
I would
besides
like,
what it
no,
says
I
here,
don't want
maybe
to
we
hear
should hear
from
from
you
people.
on that. I want to hear from them.
Yeah, I think it's a good
Okay?
idea.
Sorry about that.
No.
Yeah, I think
agree.
that we need to talk about what our unified purpose is, and let's talk about it.
Emil, do you want to begin?
I ran on student achievement and academic growth. That is number one for me. I ran on safe schools. That's number one for me. I ran on, I mean, at every conversation at a door that opened, I talked to people about spending taxpayer money efficiently and wisely. And those three things are my priorities here. And there's a lot that encompasses safety, and there's a lot that encompasses student achievement and academic growth, and there's a lot that encompasses spending taxpayer money wisely and efficiently. And those are very broad, but those are my priorities. I feel it's a school board, okay? You know, and school, that should be the priority here. And I would just like to hear what other people think.
Good idea. Who else? I know, Stephen, you
Those are
spoke
my
on this.
priorities.
But tell
And
us.
I- And I've
Tell us again.
talked to Emil about it. It's no secret that both of us being former teachers are knowledgeable about what goes on in schools. When we visit a school together, we look at each other and say, wow, that's great. Those kindergarten kids are doing math that kids used to do in the third grade. It's phenomenal. We're looking at our results of our iReady results, and kids are making tremendous progress. And so for me, that's what I want to see. That's what's important to me, and those are the things. I'm also working on my own projects. I'm working on a handbook of parents' rights. I'm collecting every board policy and every ed code that exists to give to parents so they are aware of every right and responsibility they have as a parent, so they don't have to question, can I find out about my kids' library books? Yes, we have a library program. Can I be involved in my son's curriculum? Yes, go on Canva. You will see every assignment he has. You will see how he's doing. Do you look in his book bag when he comes home from school? Do you see what he's reading? Do you check what he's doing online? So these are things I'm interested in, and I'm putting that all together as a package.
Would you consider that one of your purposes, to provide that information to parents?
Absolutely, because people question, well, do parents have rights? If you look through ed code, there's tons of, I even had someone during my campaign question what we feed the kids. And there's a whole series of things about safe food. We don't serve fried foods. We try to locally source our foods. We don't try to serve processed foods. and people are just unaware of the information that's out there. And I think as a board member, one of the things I try to do is provide information to our community so they know what's out there, they know what their rights are, they know what we're doing in schools, and I think that's, as Emil said, that's part of our unity of purpose, is making sure that everyone out there knows what's going on, and if they have a problem, they know where to go to deal with it.
Good, thank you. Melinda, what you consider a unity of purpose?
I think it goes back to my intention for running, and I think I've been very disingenuous towards some of the board members, because initially I really did want to try to unite the board and the community more, but I've actually, my actions have been opposite of that at times. So I'm glad that we're having this, because I want to bring the focus back to the reason I met with Steve Schwartz. And the first time I met him, he did not want to meet with me. I tried to meet with him, but my thing was, I'm like, I know that I'm going to be here for 4 years with this man, and I don't want to have problems all 4 years. And so the same thing when people think that there's all these conspiracy theories out there. One of the first things I said was like, do you have a problem if I voted for Trump? Like, can we agree to disagree? And now that I always refer to the great Cobb salad of Richie's Diner, and how much it's probably costing in Brown Act violation complaints, but literally, I tell him, like, I kind of just want to, like, go have a Cobb salad with you and wear my Trump hat, and you can wear your Harris hat. And his comments, you don't know I voted for Harris. And I'm like, well, I sure as heck know you didn't vote for Trump. So I want us to be able to get along. And the first conversation was like, can we agree to disagree civilly? That being said, I still owe the person I ran against, I still owe her an apology, because where I'm saying I want to be united, I think that I'm going to take credit and say, like, I've done and said things that have caused us to not be united. I talked to Jen, we did have coffee, and I made the point that I think I don't want people to enjoy the fact that we don't get along. And I think that part of it is we have a little bit opposite personalities, but if we can work together, I think our opposites can be strengths for the board. So I want to refocus on, like, my goal was unity, and I'll acknowledge that I haven't contributed to unity, but I want to, that's my purpose, is I want to refocus on, like, uniting the community and the board.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your taking accountability for things that perhaps you may have done that didn't contribute to that in the past, but set a goal moving forward. Jen, your purpose in terms of unity of purpose.
So I think my purpose has always been a two-pronged approach, and I've mentioned this several times. But one, it is pursuing a high level of academics. I think we all want that for our students. And then it's also upholding those important values that our community believes in. And there's that important piece with parents, and I'm glad Mr. Schwartz brought it up. But I boldly told the community I am not for divisive ideology, activism in the classroom. It's why we chose to address some of the issues with wanting just the American flag and making sure parents are aware if records are changed or if their students going through something really important. There shouldn't be secrets between schools and parents, and I know we have California state law that we need to work with, but that is one of my highest priorities for this community, is to represent, to hear their voice, to advocate for a stellar education, and make sure these kids are protected. And we may not all see it alike, but I feel like we are moving towards an understanding with that. We can't leave that piece out. And it doesn't negate the fact that I do want to see our kids compete with Poway and Irvine, but at the same time, I'm not willing to let go of important issues. The community has said, this is what we'd like to see in our district, so.
Thank you. And Joseph?
I think unity of purpose is wrapped around common goals, principles, values, and that's wrapped around, the students and, this educational, these 29 mini-cities functioning at a high, rate of excellence. One of those, me and Mr. Barham are working on right now, goals and accountability. That is a unity of purpose that me and him are eventually going to bring out to a vote for the rest of the board in May. The values and principles, I'll give you a general principle. Say what you mean and mean what you say before you're elected and after you're elected. Continue on with continuity and be who you are. Don't be inauthentic. So go back to your question about Congress. The reason people are so frustrated, in my opinion, is because people talk a big game, get elected in, and all of a sudden, they didn't mean what they said. And so for me, I ground on that. And also I value, and these are two pillar stones of what I ran on. I value empowering parents. The more parental rights, the better. I also value protecting the innocence of our precious children. I was not elected to represent the district. I was not elected to represent the union. I was elected to represent the values of the parents of the community who put me in. That doesn't mean I can't work with the district, and it doesn't mean I can't work with the union. I'm a member of a teachers union at my college. I am a department rep for sociology philosophy. So when I'm listening to teachers talk about unions, this and that, there's a commonality. They might not know that. They might not have heard me say that. So I'm into bridge building and pumping up, these different mechanisms in the school district that we have to work with, like district staff, admin, site admin, things like that. But I will not compromise on parental rights and protect the innocence of children. I just will not.
So I have a question. For you. So do you think on this board or in the, amongst the staff, let's say the executive staff, do you think that we are not committed to protecting the innocence of kids along with you?
I will answer that quite simply by saying there's been certain board members who are against some of the policies we passed to protect the innocence of children, like CRT, like parental rights, like a flag policy. I could go on and on. And to me, hell, I'll throw 5G in there. I want to keep students safe. People mock. It's fine, right? People mock. But I don't believe certain people shared those same values because they voted the policies down. So that's just a very straightforward answer. No, certain people do not believe in that, Emil. But
Okay, I'm just asking.
Yeah. But as a new board, we might find stability, and prior disagreements, board members might say, you know what, I disagree with you in the past, but you know what, I thought about it. I don't know, maybe you're onto something. Maybe we work more collaborative. It's like the old analogy where you get into a fight with somebody, but then become their best friend.
Because what I see so far, and I haven't visited every place, I see great teaching. I see protective teachers. I see caring teachers. I see caring staff.
Me too.
I see those things.
Yeah, me too.
So when you say, and teachers make mistakes in judgment, okay? But I think that we are committed here to protecting the innocence of kids. I believe that that everybody here is committed to that.
Then I'll be waiting to see your vote on parental rights and a flag policy in the future.
Let me say that I think it's
I
quite,
agree with you, Emil. I'm just saying, we'll be consistent, and I wait to see that vote
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
future.
it's quite normal to have an overall agreement on a goal, but have disagreements on policies that one person may think works toward that goal, another person may think it doesn't.
Thank you.
So it's not unusual to say we all believe that we're here to do what's best for students in every respect, including their health, their safety, their well-being, and their innocence. But that doesn't mean you all agree on every policy. And I wouldn't make the assumption that if you would disagree on a policy, that you disagree on the value.
If I could,
wouldn't
and
make that assumption.
thank you. As someone who worked with students for 40 years, as a father and a grandfather, I don't disagree with protecting the innocence of children, and I will echo what you said. The fact that we don't agree on a particular policy doesn't mean that I don't agree with you on protecting children from pornography and all the other things that you talked about. And I agree with you on that. I just never agreed on the particular policy. So perhaps at some point, and taking what I'm talking about with parental rights, we can put it all together in a policy that we do agree on. And I don't disagree that there are dangers out there from radiation. I just don't know enough about it to make an informed decision. And again, putting the past aside, if we can agree, as Emil agreed with me on what are my priorities, I think that let's talk about principles, not about policies. Let's talk about the ideas that we're talking about, and maybe we can together come up with something that works for all of us. Philosophically, even though we agree on what's behind it, we may not agree on the particular policy.
Because a lot of that has to do with Dr. Komrosky as well. It has to do with process. We have to do things. I believe that we want the same things, but we have to do things that are compliant with the law, for example, okay, that we haven't done. So a lot of things in the past have been process errors. And, you know, we have to get those processes correct in order to get the policies that I think we both want. And I want to remind you, with the neutral classroom policy that I put forward, what did I say in that policy? That you're looking for my vote on a flag policy. I think I said an American and state flag should be outside of, for an instructional purpose. Those should be the flags in the classroom, okay? But I think we have to pay attention to the process here. And I think that that is something that has been missing. Not only the process in terms of being compliant with the law, but also let's listen to our executive staff. They are smart people. I mean, I find them very smart, very helpful. That is what they're there for. And I think that we have to embrace that. I mean, as a first step towards moving forward with parental notification or a flag policy. They have experience in these things in terms of negotiating with the unions and the things that we need to do. And I don't think that we're doing that well.
I will agree with a lot of what both you and Mr. Schwartz said. And going back to my earlier question, even this roundabout exchange gives me more hope that the board's salvageable. Because there's a lot we just agreed on. I get the process versus the substance of the policies. I get all that. And I'll just remind you, some of what we did was uncharted territory. It's not like everybody knew, hey, just do this and that and this and that, and everything's gonna be great. Nope, do this, you're gonna get sued by the teachers union. Do this, oh, you're gonna get weaponized now because they're gonna violate Education Code 7054 and campaign on the school district time against you. Like, there's a lot of other things, but I don't want to get into the minutiae. I'm just saying I agree with a lot of what you guys said,
okay.
But we were in uncharted territory in some of these policies.
But what I want to do in the future in working with you, okay, I want to listen to the attorneys. I mean, why have the attorneys present and why hire them if we're not going to listen to them?
The issue there, though, is that there have been alternative counsel given from attorneys, and I will say we've had a track record with a specific attorney who wasn't correct in giving us the information that we needed in several capacities, which is why we have a variety of voices. There are people that we've learned along the way in 2 years that we can speak to for different issues. So you can't assume that we didn't listen. You also can't assume that they had all the right information. It is true that we want to follow the law. We do understand procedures, but when you have lawfare weaponized and a union go after us the way it went down, there was a lot at stake, and we want to work with the district office, but at times you have to come back to the board representing the community, the voices of the parents. We're not always one and the same, but we don't disregard them either. It is a very tricky role. I think we'll all agree to that. It's complicated with all the stakeholders, but it's not that simple. So,
well, I find it very simple so far.
Well, and that's a big difference between us because we've spent 2 years living the experience.
So I wish I had been keeping track of every time I've heard the word agree, because I've heard that more than I expected to in terms of people hearing what each other is saying, and I haven't been tallying the number of times. But it's very hopeful, because even though there are some fundamental disagreements, I hear you making statements where you've attributed to the other person. I agree with the point that you've made. And in my opinion, that's a good step forward, just acknowledging the areas where you do agree. Melinda, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I actually think that we agree more than we disagree, and we agree so much. It's like I said in closed session, I think we're fighting over like who loves these policies the most, and and even Mr. Schwartz said something about the neutral classroom policy, and he said if you get it through the union, and it's like he's like, you've got my vote. So I think that we can come together as a community. I want to ask the rest of the board, like, and it may take time because there are some pretty deep wounds that we all have. But I want to just acknowledge that Jen and Joseph came out of COVID, and they were new board members. And that is an environment that, like, no one has ever been in before. And so I personally, I've passed a lot of judgment on the way they've done things, and I know I wasn't there. I want to move on. I want all of us to move on, and I'm hoping we can stop saying, like, what if? Well, what if this attorney, or what if? And if we can, like, move on and know we've been given a gift, we have an opportunity to move on, and we have 2 new board members, so we have new eyes, and that maybe we can do this in a different way. Jen brought up, it's true, I went through and did my rules of debate and passed that without first, we talked on the dais, but I thought it was a great idea, so I know how it is to feel like, hey, this is a great idea, I'm going to pass it. But now I'm realizing, like, feedback's always a good thing. Community feedback's been good, and the community feedback, I think, is going to be, I sense the tone already calming in the community a little bit. I think we're going to always have a handful of people that are just here for the fight. The school board is an opportunity for them to, like, fight.
I'm glad you said that, because sometimes you're put in a position for people who like to argue with their neighbors to let you do the arguing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not even something that you seek out, but it's put upon you. So I think it's good that you acknowledge that. One of the things that you said that keeps coming back to why we're here today is to really do your best to get beyond past judgments. There have been wounds. There have been things that have caused disagreements and hurt. But the judgments that you've made before, you have a chance to talk to an individual and try to straighten that out. But the most important thing is not to hold on to that in the long term, but to make an assumption that we're all here for the right purpose. We're all here with the right intent of doing what's best for students, even if we sometimes disagree on a specific policy. And if we could do that, then we're not going to personalize everything. And that really is one of the things we're going to talk about right now as we move on to page 12 of the handbook. Because I think what is said on this next section, page 12 and 13, and then moving on to some of the protocols, is really the basis of why we're here today.
Oh, yeah, and I just want to let the board know, I want to see if I can get consensus to make a change on a meeting guideline just before we leave this page.
Which page is that now?
Page 12, under meeting guidelines.
Okay.
I can do it right now unless you want to open up for this
No,
page.
you go ahead. Right ahead.
I don't want any eating on the dais. Chewing mints, no eating on the dais. Chewing mints is one thing, but like no eating. I think it's unprofessional. Everybody agree? We get consensus? All right, no eating. Thank you.
I'm going to just write that down and add it to it. Not eating on the dais.
And quite honestly, if we got low blood sugar and we want to eat, maybe we should have regular breaks. Hey, I wasn't the greatest at that. I'm prior board president because of the dynamics, but maybe we can incorporate breaks, maybe not, but that could be something that you think is. Right. Well, that's the other. No, I hear what you're saying, but then some community members have been saying, it's unprofessional. We get up and use the bathroom. Well, okay, then maybe we need a break. I hear you.
There are times when it's in the best interest of the board to take a break, to either go to the bathroom, have a snack, or something like that. And especially if it's a fairly long meeting, there's no reason not to take breaks.
I'm up for it if you guys are. I'm not rigidly saying we should schedule it, but if we're up for a break every meeting, if the meeting goes long, 100%.
I am praying that someone will, motion to recess. I just am the new board president, so
I'm on board.
I'm very supportive of having the board do those
How about,
things.
how about meetings with, what is it? In our board meetings, we approve the agenda with flexibility. So something in here with flexibility with breaks, some language where it's not rigid, but if we want to do a break, we just,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm up
I
for it.
was thinking that the whole last meeting.
Oh,
So,
till 1:30 in the morning?
yeah,
Well, you can simply you can simply add, take breaks as needed.
Yeah.
And leave it
Yeah.
up to the board to determine when it's needed.
I'm up for it.
So, thank you for bringing those up. I'm going to add one in my opinion, because it used to drive me crazy when I would see boards do this. But there are times I would see board members, when they're supposed to be conducting business, texting people, and sometimes texting other board members. And to me, that's a lack of professionalism on the board, and it could sometimes be really very harmful to what the board's trying to accomplish. I don't know if you all agree, but it's one of the areas that I felt very strongly about as a superintendent, because I just don't think that's when texting should take place. When you're at a board meeting, I think your full attention should be on what the board is doing and discussing. Any comments on that?
I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm guilty of it myself, okay? I don't like it. I don't like it.
I was a deputy superintendent in a district where 2 board members were constantly texting each other during the meeting, and I thought, how disrespectful.
I would agree, unless it's, you get, Joe, you're a parent, you get a text from your wife that your child is ill.
Well, that's,
You have to say, excuse me for a minute, I need to contact my wife, or
Yeah,
Jen,
I'm-
you get something went haywire where, at the school you work at, say, excuse me for a minute, I need to respond to this. But other than that, I think I agree with you.
I think the only other exception should be if someone, like when Steve was attending via Zoom and there was a breakdown in, I think he texted, like, Dr. Woods because his phone cut out.
Right.
So that would be the only
yeah,
exception.
and there may be exceptions.
Yeah, but
in-
I agree with you. We
In general, I
could,
just think
we
it's
could,
disrespectful.
yeah, okay.
So looking at the
I
meeting.
got another change.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I promise you, Steve, this is not to throw you under the bus. What you didn't realize on that meeting is like 4 or 5 district staff were handing your phone around during the meeting.
Yeah.
Part of me says if you can't Zoom, you shouldn't be able to attend the meeting, but that's rigid. All I'm saying is you didn't see behind the scenes, there was a lot of delay on the phone, and I don't know how we work through that.
We should have been on WhatsApp. If we were on WhatsApp, it would have been no problem.
What's up?
Yeah, if you don't have WhatsApp, you can call anywhere in the world for free.
Does it, were you on WhatsApp at the time,
I
or?
wasn't, but had I
Oh.
known that, when they tried to set it up, it didn't work, so the only way I could work was to call directly. I didn't know if Gary was on WhatsApp, and I don't think he was.
Well,
Otherwise, if you have the WhatsApp app, you can call anyone in the world anytime for free.
Yeah.
Does
So
it-
like I talk to my family in Israel all the time on the phone, and you don't have to, it's,
Does it Zoom with your face, or is it just voice?
I don't know if
It's
they
just
have
voice.
FaceTime. I think it's just voice.
Yeah, I think it's just voice.
But
I-
had I known that the thing wasn't gonna work when we tested it, then we would have done something.
I'm up for that, because it helps, like, I can't tell you, like, the delay it caused, but you didn't know that. Yeah, yeah.
I think we need to prepare better if that happens again. So I agree with you on that.
Anything else you'd like to add, or anybody would like to add to these meeting guidelines, what we agreed to?
Maybe the WhatsApp that we just talked about, unless we just agreed to it, or something to that effect.
I mean,
I don't
I agree
anticipate,
with you. I don't like the phone, so I think maybe we can amend it later, because I think maybe it should be like a Zoom meeting or a Google meeting.
I got you.
So I'm with you.
Okay,
Let's figure out something.
all right.
Okay. So under those bullets from meeting guidelines, please, to yourselves, take a quick look at them, read them over. Are there any that anyone disagrees with or has questions about that maybe need clarification?
I think one thing I said in that first meeting is more than restoring parliamentarian order and style is restoring respect. And the two can work hand in hand together, right? But if we can really work hard, and again, I haven't been perfect in every meeting, if we're not dismissing, devaluing others, going after each other's personal life or faith or any of those things, that is huge. And if you don't mind, I'm going to segue into operating in a governance culture of trust and respect,
Good,
because I
'cause
think
we're ready
that's
to
what
do that. Go ahead.
that's what we want to do, right? So show respect, not devalue others, not arriving at a negative conclusion right off the bat. Don't get personal. And the thing that I want to emphasize here is, can we agree to do that both on the dais and when we're representing in public? And this is going to be awkward, but I'm going to bring it up because it's important to me. But Mr. Swartz, in the past in public, you have labeled me or Dr. Komrosky and I as white Christian nationalists. I know there have been people that have spoken to it, so just let me finish because we can get past this.
Go ahead.
But here's something else that's really important to me as a woman. At CSBA, we stood in front of a Christmas tree. We took a group picture. I put my hand on your shoulder, and you told me, you know what? You can go ahead and cop a feel if you want. And I stood there in shock, not knowing what to say. Melinda heard that. We walked away, and she laughed and said, "That's just Steve." And I walked, wait, let me finish.
I think
walked
this
away.
is a civil matter.
Melinda,
We shouldn't have this.
let me finish, because I did ask.
There's going to be a lot of problems if you keep going on.
Well, here's the thing. I
I'm
did
going to
talk
ask
to.
right now, point of order, this is not regarding the governance handbook, and there's already attorneys
But if
involved.
the attorney gave me the
Give me a
advice as
second.
to
No,
why
no,
I'm here
There's attorneys
today.
involved to the level that you don't
The
understand.
attorney told me, bring it up in the workshop, because this has to do with how we treat each other. Mr. Huff spoke with me and said, look, this is something, we can't fall into a level of religious bigotry, sexual harassment, anything like that. And I'm willing to get past this, but you know what? That is a fact of how we treat each other here in the workshop. And I was told by legal that it was something to share, because it's important how we treat each other.
No,
And if I, as a woman, am
you're
going
digging
to be
yourself.
ignored.
I think you're digging your own grave, and I'm trying to help you by saying, point of order, you need to stop talking about right now. I'm doing you a favor by telling you.
David Huff specifically shared with me that this is something that can be discussed as we discuss positive governance and how we treat each other professionally.
You're kicking a hornet's
You need
nest.
to do it in private, Jen.
And it needs to, I'm doing you a favor right now by saying, if you wanna kick a hornet's nest, I think it might be too late, but you're gonna dig yourself into a hole, and I was trying to do you a favor by calling point of order, so I think we need to call point of order.
What you didn't do me a favor with is devaluing who I am as a woman and not acknowledging the egregious commentary with that. So we can
I'm not
work through
acknowledging,
this.
and David Huff knows, I'll have my own private attorneys that I pay for myself, and that this is a civil matter.
I'm not
and
suing
not
anyone. I'm just having a discussion here.
So,
That's not my intention.
I think we,
If I
think it's an
could,
opportunity to let Mr.
excuse me,
Schwartz,
excuse me.
respond.
If I called you a Christian nationalist, I don't recall doing that. I sincerely apologize if I did that.
Thank you. It was in the
Sincerely.
CSBA application. Thank
I
you.
don't say it again?
It was in your CSBA application.
What
for
did I
nomination.
say?
Christian nationalism is something that you wanted to fight against.
Did I call you a Christian
I
nationalist?
tried to ask you, Steve, can you explain yourself? And you
Yes.
shut me down, didn't want to talk. So I said, I'm a Christian, but I accept your apology. Thank you.
Did I call you a Christian nationalist?
You were assuming me, Danny, and Jen.
I'm sorry, did I call you a Christian nationalist?
You did not talk
Thank
to
you,
me,
that's
Steve.
all. Mrs. Wiersma, you know, I tried to disregard what you said, and I have an attorney, and he told me I should contact all the people who were there at the Christmas tree and get written statements from each of them to see if each of them heard what you said you heard. And I have 5 written statements from the 5 people who were there, and none of them heard what you just accused me of. Now,
Melinda
I do have,
Anderson
excuse me,
told
you didn't
me
let me finish.
That's just
You-
Steve. She heard it. If she denied it, that's a lie. She heard it as we walked away
Well,
together.
you could ask Mr. Barham if he heard it.
I didn't hear
You
anything.
were between the two
Excuse
of
me,
us,
you
and
could ask
she heard
Mr.
it.
Barham if he heard it.
I didn't hear anything.
You could ask Dr. Woods if he heard it. You could ask Mrs. Anna Seabar if she heard it.
I didn't assess
Excuse
anyone
me.
hearing it other than Dr. Anderson.
And you could ask Mrs. Anderson if she heard it.
And everybody knows that I'm not making any comments or getting involved unless I have an attorney present. And
Yeah,
that's
and
the
so
level
my
that we're
attorney
doing.
will be filing suit in civil court
And at
for
this-
slander and libel.
At this point, it is
And
a
at this
civil matter.
point,
It is a civil matter.
I've had enough.
Should we
So
take a
I'm
little
being
recess?
disregarded as a woman.
It's really offensive. This is a closed meeting.
Dr. Anderson, can we take a break?
I'm going to call for a recess, yeah.
How long do you want?
5 minutes.
Okay.
I understand if Mr. Schwartz needs to be dismissed.
Call my attorney.
Okay.
Find out what was filed.
Okay. So we are reaching the 1 o'clock time period, and some people have to pick up kids from school. So what I'd like to do is adjourn this meeting, and I think we need to come back to the governance handbook.
I all recall that there was a request for board member comments at the end. I don't know if you have time.
Oh,
to
yes,
include
thank you. Would you like to open for board member comments?
Sure. Just want to thank the board for getting together today. We had to air out some dirty laundry going into those possible injustices, but it's a step forward that we recalibrate as a board. And it's important for the community to see us, starting with leadership by example right here on the dais. It's rough, but we're going to stabilize. That's my hope. I've seen some improvement today in our conversations and the level of agreement. We're trying to find agreement amongst each other, and there's plenty to go around. The disagreement, they can start falling away. I mean, unless we're voting our values and we disagree on that, totally fine. But if we can treat each other respectfully, I'm all on board. Let's just be honest and respectful with each other, even if you disagree with somebody. But we don't need to demean. We don't need to be participating on social media battles behind the scenes and you know, whatever battles are happening at the street level. We just need to be professionals here on the dais. That's why we were elected. Thanks.
I heard you put out a video about, you gave me a shout out in a video.
I did?
I heard. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, I want to say, and as I've just said to you in there, and as I've said to others here, the work that you and I have done, I think has been great. I mean, you know, we haven't seen eye to eye on things, and we've talked about those things. But when we focus on schools and education, I think we are doing great work.
Well, and people need to see this.
Yeah.
Starts
I
right
think
here.
we're doing great work. I mean, it's like I said, we're not going to, you know the things. I don't want to relitigate those things.
Yep.
But when we focus on schools, which is what we should be doing, and the kids, we're doing good stuff. So I'm appreciative of that. And I'm just hoping that we can move forward. I still think we have some things to hash out, maybe. I'm not holding any ill will, okay, in my heart, okay, towards you at all, or anybody here. Like I said, there's things I don't like. I hate the social media stuff. I think that we have more control over that with the people that are putting that stuff out than we're willing to admit, and I think that that really hurts. I think when we talk to other community members about each other, that really hurts. And I hate that. And, you know, I'm hoping that we can stop all those things because it doesn't help us here. I value my relationship with Mr. Schwartz. I know that some people can't stand that, but too bad, because that's the way I roll. I think you're doing a great job as the president. And Dr. Woods, I love the relationship that we have, and I love the executive staff. Lene, thank you so much for all of your input. I mean, our safety and security director has such a great vision. I mean, we're all here for the kids, and that's what we need to focus on. I mean, not all this other stuff. I mean, it's a distraction. It's a distraction. So, thank you, everybody.
Can I say, I want to thank Jen for meeting me on Saturday. I think there are people that want to see us, someone used the word catfight, but I think like two strong women sometimes are not going to get along. But I also think like two strong women can be a force to be reckoned with. So anyone that was enjoying the fight, I mean, you know, I think that her and I can work together really well. And I actually am very optimistic. When I go to the schools, I just pointed out, Joseph's been meeting with the ASB, and I will do a site visit, and I feel the momentum of having board members. Steve goes to soccer games and mathlete competitions, and, you know, Emil and Jen and I have been trying to do site visits when we can, and I feel the momentum of the students and the staff, I feel like there was a breakdown in the relationship with the district and the board, but I can kind of already see the momentum building in favor of the board. So I think this meeting was really important. We do need to go back to the governance handbook, but I think what was accomplished here today may be better, that we were able to air our grievances and move on. So did anyone else want to make comment?
Mr. Shapiro, I would just like to thank you for coming, and I saw a number of steps forward, and I really appreciate that.
Schwartz.
Well, I want to thank you all for.
Can I make my
I'm
comment?
sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
There's 2 more comments.
Sorry.
I just want to give you a chance, Jen, to retract what you said, because you know it's a lie. I'm giving you a chance publicly to retract it. I would really appreciate it if you would, and we can move forward, because if not, my attorney just was watching the meeting, and he's preparing the lawsuit now. I have statements from everyone else who was there that nothing was said. So I'm giving, maybe you thought I said something, maybe you thought you heard something. I'm giving you the opportunity to retract it publicly, because you hurt me deeply. You really did hurt me deeply. And I resent what you said. And I'm giving you the opportunity to take it back, and for whatever reason, maybe you misheard or you thought you heard something. But that's all I have to say.
I have done my best in the past 2 years to represent this community and the students and the district with truth and integrity. I would never make something up like this. And Melinda, I appreciate you saying you support me as a woman, because if you do, then you know. You know what happened. And I sat on it for weeks, and I feel like I have been a victim of some abuse, and I think it's right for me to stand up for myself and for people to understand that we expect you as men to offer us respect and dignity. It's important to me. And I came here today because we do need to have an honest conversation. And I did want a public apology, because those things hurt, and I didn't know what to do with it. But at the end of the day, I am not here to send a silver bullet through you. I'm here to say, can you recognize the hurt and the disrespect? Because I do believe you're here to love kids, and I do believe that you enjoy being a school board member, and I support you in that. I don't support you when you choose to make those kinds of comments to me as a woman, and I need that to be heard. And this workshop was the opportunity, because if we're going to be professional and have expectations of one another, accountability is where it needs to be. And so I'm hopeful you and I can continue this conversation, but I will always speak truth. I'm not here to weaponize anything. And I do want to thank this community for bearing with us in the last 2 years. I actually do have faith that we can come together. Melinda, I appreciate your transparency, and I appreciate you being honest with some things. Emil, thank you for having the conversation with me. I saw what an incredible trustee you could be from the beginning. It's why I reached out to you and formed that relationship. Dr. K, I could not tell you how glad I am that you're back and that you fought through incredible angst and peril, because you believe in the kids and you believe in being here to represent. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I love you. Mr. Shapiro, thank you for facilitating. I know this was probably an unordinary meeting, but I appreciate your advice and your wisdom, and I hope from here we can move forward and change some things. Thank you for serving in the community of education, because it means a great deal. Thank you for dealing with the unexpected. We appreciate your time, and thank you to Dr. Woods for setting this up for us. I think there can only be healing if there's a true acknowledgement of some of the problems that are here. And if we shed light, I think we can move forward together saying, you know what, there is room for forgiveness. There is room for working together, but we have to do it with honesty. So thank you to the staff for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak.
Okay, thank you. The next regular open session business meeting of the Governing Board of Education is scheduled for February 25th, 2024. This meeting is adjourned today, Tuesday, February 25th at like 1:08 p.m.